y'all. Welcome back to the channel for another vlog where I talk about the trials and suffering that comes from being late diagnosed autistic. For those of you new to the channel, my name is Jess, and I finally got a doctor to agree that I fit the criteria for an autism diagnosis to a T. I failed that freaking test, whatever that test they have is. Completely 100% fit the diagnostic criteria for this diagnosis back in 2018, after a stay in a psychiatric facility that I later discovered was the result of autistic burnout from the terrible restaurant job that I had at the time, which was a result of not understanding what I'm going to talk about today. But as an aside, I would also like to point out that I always thought it was ironic that you wouldn't think to ask somebody who was recovering from cancer to go right back to work, as if nothing happened. Yet I was expected to do that after a mental hospital stay that almost cost me my life, that could have cost me my life. Just some food for thought when we're talking about how difficult it is to function through, again, what I'm about to talk about. So moving on to today's subject of how irksome and tiresome autism is, I'd like to discuss what is known as Caetextia, or context blindness. So context is what directs our perception, and therefore also drives our response to the things that we are perceiving. It drives things like facial recognition, right? Like when you have face blindness, that is the inability to contextualize someone's face, right? To put together pieces of someone's face and recognize it out of context. So, and then context blindness also can drive emotional empathy, our understanding of language and communication, and how we problem solve. Context is important to all of these things, and these are all areas where autistic people tend to experience deficits in functionality, regardless of their relationship to this idea of context blindness. It's interesting because I struggle quite a bit with not feeling autistic enough, as someone who's late diagnosed and not working with a therapist currently. I struggle really feeling autistic enough to have a say in the community, like talking about, stuff that autistics face. But then I go back and I look at all these conflicts that I've had, like the major blow-ups and fallouts, and the fact that I have no friends left from any significant point in my life. And I'm like, whoa, it's 100% because of undiagnosed and untreated autism. Wow, because it's impossible, or I have yet to find a way to completely mask this context blindness. If you've managed to find a way and you're autistic and you're watching this and you figured out how to man this guessing game so that you can win it more often than you lose it, you let me know. You drop a comment, we'll talk, because I really would like to know, because I have not figured it out. Anyway, so people who experience context blindness, they give meaning in absolutes rather than in a contextually sensitive way. So the easy example I can come up with is the one that is the most prevalent for me, the one that gets in my way the most. And that is the concept of interrupting. So we all know this idea of when autistic people talk to each other, we overlap speech, yada, yada, yada. So that tends to get in the way, like contextually, right? If you're not talking to other autistic people, maybe that's not an appropriate way to talk. Or if you're not in a setting where other people would understand that that's how you're talking, for example. But in most contexts, interrupting is considered rude, it's considered socially inappropriate, it is considered a way of telegraphing that you don't care what the person that you're speaking to has to say. Autistic kids especially we're often interrupted ourselves. We're talked over. People speak for us, they answer for us, with regards to special interests, as well as, we're always punished for not understanding the social rules regarding turn taking in conversation, like what I said about the overlapping. Like, it's common for neurodivergent people to speak that way, but neurotypical people think it's rude. Or I'm sorry, allistic people, non-autistics, think it's rude. As such, it can be difficult for an autistic person like myself to understand a context or to immediately think or have that be the first thing that comes to mind, because as I said, context blindness causes you to give meaning in an absolute. So then we go by the absolute definition of interrupting, which is that it's rude. It's a rude act meant to telegraph that you are not interested in what the person has to say. But obviously we understand that there are contexts in which interrupting would be okay, right? An emergency came up and, your house is on fire, you're having a conversation with your friend in the front lawn, your house catches fire, and you have to interrupt and say, oh my God, I smell smoke, I have to go, put the fire out. Or, I'm having a mental health crisis, I have to go put my brain fire out, so to speak. That kind of thing. Stuff that comes up that requires the conversation to be cut off if you're talking, messaging. Tommy fell down the stairs. Instead of just saying, I have to go, bye, I'll talk to you when I can, just adding that little bit, Tommy fell down the stairs. Context is also difficult to determine and respond to correctly for those of us who have poor theory of mind, right? Like, of course, it's going to be hard to understand a context where interrupting might be necessary if it's also hard for you to conceptualize that people have thoughts and feelings outside of your own, right? Like, and I'll talk about this later, but this also is a part of, it's really hard for autistic people to conceptualize people behaving in ways that are not the ways that we would behave. It's the same thing. So of course, the big question people always ask is, why is this context blindness, of all the autistic traits that you struggle with late diagnosed, why is this one the one I consider the most disabling? And here's the truth. I've said it before that like 90% of my struggles communicating with my mother, with my ex-husband, with my friends, jobs, any relationship, across relationships, I feel like I'm speaking gibberish. Like, I get treated like I'm speaking gibberish when I feel like I am being perfectly clear about what I need. And like I said, this affects me across relationships, but honestly, this is the worst when it's at work. Like, the fact that I need you as a boss to clarify when we say no cell phones on the floor, What we really mean is no cell phones on the floor, period. Right? I've had some jobs where it's no cell phones on, on stage or on the floor or wherever, on guest fronting spaces. But you can have them in the back, and you can check them if you're not in front of guests. Or, like pretty much every restaurant job I've ever had, where you'll get yelled at for being on your phone, even if you're on your phone standing out by the dumpster having a cigarette on your break. Like, genuinely, I've had bosses who, if you even have your phone out in the restaurant at all, even if you're in the process of going on your break, you will get in trouble for it. And the fact that the rule in the employee handbook is always no cell phones. But, okay, how does that rule result in two different expectations, right? It's because autistics don't think about clarifying the context, right? They just assume that you're going to understand what they mean. And I never have. And it's always gotten me in trouble. Always. And it leaves me vulnerable to being taken advantage of by abusive people too. Like, you have no freaking clue how it feels to be gaslit by somebody who is mad at you because you misunderstood them. And they genuinely believe that you misunderstood them on purpose, or that you're misconstruing them or putting words in their mouth, when you're just like, I didn't know the context, and I had to guess. And again, I'll go into this later, but that's also why I advocate doing away with the guessing game. But we'll talk about that later. Because what I want to talk about now is that the solution to this, a lot of people have said, is, just make sure that you only have autistic friends. But that doesn't do much to help, because the two ex-friends that I have that I consider, who were the most abusive towards the end of our friendship, both autistic as well. And both of them actually ended up upending and ultimately destroying my entire social support network by insisting that I should know, and then giving my actions intentions that I didn't mean, when they were the ones who forced me to play the freaking guessing game in the first place. Like, I clearly could not contextualize why this person was hurt because of the way they reacted to me. I told myself that I wasn't going to air this on the channel on the off chance that it brings up old drama that I just don't want to deal with, because I don't know who's watching my channel or whatever, even though we don't talk. But I'm frankly sick of suffering in silence. So if these jerks want to bring the drama, bring the drama. Because people continuing to get away with the way they smeared me after gaslighting me for months and using my context blindness against me. But I also think that it's important for other people who think that they may also experience context blindness to be able to help explain, to use this example as a way to help explain what they need from people with regards to communication. So I became friends with Irina through a mutual on Facebook, and we developed an individual rapport besides our mutual friendship. Looking back though, I always knew what she was. But the most painful part of context blindness is remembering, like I said, that not everyone is going to be you, right? Like, so we had our falling out around the same time I started this channel, actually. And a part of my struggle with understanding her and like being able to empathize with her was not understanding why she wasn't doing anything to boost my content, right? Like, I had a ton of friends on Facebook at the time who had big followings, other, ran public pages who, were sharing my content. So I was struggling with that, like, why you claim to care about my content and then would never even so much as watch it. Instead of kindly explaining to me that she used her Facebook to help her students with supplemental learning. She was I think she taught classical Greek history or something like that. That it wasn't a personal account, which she could have nicely explained, and I would have said, oh, okay, moving on. But instead, she lectured me about how you can't expect everyone to be just like you. You can't expect everyone to do everything like you do. And, of course that made no fucking sense to me, right? Because without the context of knowing that she was using her account for teaching as opposed to as a personal account, like, I had no way of understanding her or where she was coming from. And even after she understood that I didn't get that, and after I finally did get that, she had no grace at all for me. But like think about it. Someone with context blindness, why would it make sense that somebody who claims to be your friend and cares about your content wouldn't even consume it? Why would that make sense unless somebody explained the context? Like, the fact that this is such a struggle for autistics to understand, like, of course, something is not going to make sense without context. And the fact that y'all expect everybody to be good enough at this guessing game, like, I can't. But the extra interesting thing, and this is where, this is why I mentioned gaslighting, was because the extra interesting thing about what happened with the arena was that she knew I had stalkers on Facebook, an ex-friend and an ex-boyfriend. The ex-boyfriend wasn't the one stalking me, it was an ex of his that was fixated on me even after he and I stopped dating. But even after she knew that, and she insisted that she only used her Facebook for her students, she somehow thought it'd be slick and that nobody would call her out making a public post telling people that I was dangerous and to avoid me because I was purposefully antagonizing her over not giving a shit about my content. Completely leaving out the fact that she never explained why. I was just left to guess. Okay? The fact that this was somebody who is also autistic, okay? Anytime you think that it's freaking okay to say to an autistic person, you should just know you are being ableist. And to this day, I still can't freaking believe that people let her get away with that. People let her get away with, yeah, no, if I tell you I need you to give more in our relationship, but you don't have the spoons, and you make the choice to further stigmatize people with BPD instead of being honest like a grown-up, you are, in fact, a giant piece of shit. Right? She was telling people that I was just acting out my attachment issues because I've been diagnosed with BPD. I've been in remission for years. I did DBT twice a week for 2 years. And instead of taking responsibility or just being honest about the fact that she didn't have the spoons to be the kind of friend that I needed, in addition to her caregiver role to our mutual, she decided to use context blindness against me, to make it out like I was purposefully being antagonistic, when really I just genuinely didn't understand what was going on. Like, and the other reason, this is the biggest reason why I finally decided to talk about Irina, is because I'm done apologizing for the fact that I can't mask context blindness. Like, I have really good pattern recognition, but I do still need to be exposed to the pattern in order to recognize it. So if we have a new friendship, or the kind of friendship where certain things don't come up very often, it's gonna take me a while to recognize the pattern. And I'm sick of being punished because I try to guess what the context is. And I either guess that you are being malicious and that ruins everything because you weren't, or I stupidly am like, oh, well, last time I thought the context was malicious, I got in trouble, so this time I'm gonna assume good things and then bad things happen. Like, I'm done with that. I'm done with that, and I really think that any other autistic people who struggle in this way should be done with it too, because it's not fucking fair. I feel once I've helped you understand that I need you to be explicit in this way and to be concrete about the context of the things that you are asking of me or telling me and why it's important, I feel like if they aren't clear, if they turn around and they aren't clear and then get mad when I struggle, that's their issue now. We don't need to be internalizing that. That is the other person's issue now. Because having context blindness really is alienating enough already. Like, I feel like I'm the only one who doesn't understand an inside joke. Or like, you know, when you're scrolling through social media and it's hashtag if you know, you know, and it's like, no, I don't know. Even if it's something that you should know, right? And then constantly being told that you meant things that you did not, or that you did it on purpose to be malicious. Like, it's not fair, and we shouldn't put up with it anymore. Being upfront and explicit and concrete and absolute about what your needs are, about why you're doing something, shouldn't be that hard. And it's definitely a lot easier than when we try to guess and get it wrong. Because then your fragility can't handle that. And I'm really gonna try to say this with as much sensitivity as possible, because it does apply to more than one person currently in my life. But if you're the kind of person that needs to be able to disappear without needing to take the time to add context, you also need to be the kind of person who can accept that that will be a source of discomfort and distrust for your autistic friends that they may not be able to overcome. like I said, I can learn to develop contextual sensitivity, and we can train ourselves to recognize and to guess more effectively. But that requires people to help us learn in the meantime. Like I said, if I've never put in the situation to need to understand that context, I can't learn how to recognize the patterns that make up that context that will help me understand it without you needing to tell me. So kind of have to be patient with me while I learn in the meantime. Or, as is the case with my ex-best friend, Anina, accept that our friendship just is going to have certain limits and different boundaries then, that may be able to shift and change once I learn more about you. But, until I learn that context, until I can achieve more contextual sensitivity with you, there may have to be walls between us, is all I'm saying. I'm really still learning how context blindness affects me socially, and all it takes to be able to work through. I really just think that what we need to do is just decide ultimately as a community that directness is valued over this sort of holistic idea that if somebody loved you, they'd remember things about you, or they just know and they would need you to tell them. Someone not automatically understanding the context of your feelings or actions doesn't mean that they don't care, but they're not capable of caring once you explain to them what the context is. So, yeah. It's interesting. This is one of the more difficult episodes for me to sort of put into words how I feel. Like, it's one thing explaining the nitty-gritty of the definition of context blindness, but it's like blind people being able to explain things in a visual manner. They're blind. How would they be able to explain how to visualize something if they've been blind from birth, right? And that's the struggle. I try to explain context blindness to people, but I don't understand context, and I don't understand how to discern context. So of course it's hard for me to explain. It's one of those things where it's a constant so really, if you know somebody who struggles this way, patience is just the word of the day. Patience and understanding that we don't do things on purpose to be malicious. We don't forget you on purpose. And we aren't inconsistent on purpose. We just need to be reminded of the context. Yeah. I never know how to end these videos, but I guess I will end by mentioning that Halloween is, it is Wednesday, no, it's Thursday, 5:13 a.m. Yikes. 5 days away, 4 days away, Halloween. I have my Halloween podcast episode coming. I have to re-record my ad segment. after all this time, I didn't realize that my ad segment still says that I'm the devil's advocate, and I have not been the devil's advocate for about a year now. So, oops to that. But I have my Halloween episode of the podcast coming out, and I have another Halloween episode of Horror Corner. I have a Halloween episode of Horror Corner coming up, where I am going to talk about I'm going to take a break from my horror history, from Eli Roth's horror history briefly, to talk about, I never thought that I would find anything that genuinely disturbed or frightened me again until I discovered analog horror. Like, I really, and, analog horror is one of those things that is, I'd consider it probably one of the newest subgenres of horror, considering that it is a web-based horror subgenre. But I want to talk about it because the fact that Gen Z millennials, we're all jaded, right? Like, every single freaking comment section under every horror video, film critique or whatever is, nothing scares me anymore. Like, I liked it, but it wasn't scary. It was, or, you get the feeling that when people say, oh, this genuinely scared me, that they don't really mean that it genuinely scared them. Like, is not the same as the kinds of feelings that I get from watching some of these analog horror series. Like, my friend from work got me into SCP, and I've been watching the Mandala catalog, and of course I've been getting into the Backrooms. But it is absolutely, and this idea of liminal space on top of it, like, absolutely cosmically terrifying. And I'm so stoked to talk about it. So that will be the Halloween episode. And then the week following that is when I had said I was going to post this episode, but this episode is going to go up as soon as it's edited. So the Halloween episode, or the episode on object permanence, and I'm sorry, object constancy is what people with ADHD struggle with, not object permanence. But that's the discussion for that episode, which will be the one that I will put out the first week of November. And then after that, I will return to regular content. I think I'd mentioned in my body horror video that my next history of horror video from that series is going to be on horror movie sequels that don't suck, was the episode of the series for anybody who's watching along with me. That series also, by the way, is available on AMC. It's an AMC show, not a Shudder original. I forgot to put that in the description of the video. It is just showing on Shudder because they have a partnership with AMC. They're also showing previews and trailers and clips from Interview with the Vampire. So those are things that you can expect in the future. As far as neurodivergent content, after that, I have a couple of ideas, things I want to talk about, because I haven't really talked about, the combination of ADHD and autism. So I'm kind of thinking of some ideas like that. I have 12 podcast ideas coming. TikTok is a never-ending cesspool of, how dare you have an opinion I don't agree with. So definitely check back for more. I'm going to be posting more consistently, more podcast episodes as well. So make sure that you check for the Halloween episode of that, available wherever you get podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any content, whether your jam is horror or neurodivergent content or art-related content. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of it. And I guess we will see you in the next episode.